It's March 23rd, 2023. I'm with Mom, and we're going to talk about some of her books that she's loved through her life, like we did for Dad a couple years ago. Good morning.
Good morning.
So,
where's the camera? I feel like I'm on camera.
It's just voices. The dogs are playing together, so that's going to be our only background noise. Okay, what's your first book?
Well, the first book I want to talk about is when I realized I enjoyed reading serious books and not just easy, entertaining books. And that was when I read Great Expectations by Dickens. And I read that at a time in my life when I was you'd think I was least likely to have time to read. And that was when I had 5 children and had gone back to school at Weber State. And I was just overwhelmed with so much going on in my life. And I just decided I needed time to myself. I needed to relax. I needed to go check out the library and find something to read.
And what time of day would you make those times? Like when?
I think usually always I read in the evening at bedtime.
After when kids have gone down?
Yeah. And even now, even though I don't have all of those distractions or wonderful distractions or things to keep me busy in the middle of the day, I still prefer reading at bedtime.
I remember you telling me before about how when maybe even far earlier, when just maybe me or Lisa were tiny, you started really going to the library and checking out
children's books.
But not any adult? Or
I don't think so. I don't remember checking out books for me. Although one time I just was browsing in the library, the Bountiful Library, and found another one of my favorite books, which you don't usually just find it by randomly looking in this section, but it was called The Murderer and the Poet. And it's about, the poet is Emily Dickinson, and the murderer is, oh shoot, we might have to involve Jim in this for a second.
No, we don't.
The bomber in Salt Lake City, Hoffman, yeah, who killed a couple of people and accidentally blew himself up. He forged an Emily Dickinson poem as part of his forgeries that he got away with for a while.
So is that book just kind of true crime about him?
It was a true
forgery.
It was not a novel. It was a true story about him mostly. And it's kind of interesting because years later, I attended this kind of self-help session with a couple of my friends from book club, Stephanie and Amy, and it was out at Cottonwood Rec Center, and it was we went once a week to these sessions on hypnosis to lose weight. Mm-hmm. And the woman who conducted these sessions was Dory Olds, and that's Hoffman's ex-wife.
Oh my gosh.
And she divorced him when she found out what he was really like. And I really liked her. And she still had a daughter living at home in high school and was supporting herself by this job she did.
Did she talk about her?
No.
You just knew that relationship?
Yeah. No, we didn't discuss Hoffman with her at all. But I gave her a ride home one night from the rec center and saw that she lived in very low-income housing in an apartment. And when she was married to him, he was bringing in the money. They had a nice home on the East Bench in Bountiful. So it was just interesting to get to know a little bit more about her.
Does anything from the book, Great Expectations, stand out as why you liked it?
I love the story of Miss Havisham.
I don't know the book. I've never read it.
You don't? No. Well, she's all prepared to marry the sweetheart of her life. She's the rich lady of the town, rich young woman of the town. And he stands her up at the altar and leaves her. and there was reasons you learn later, but she just froze in time. She never took off her wedding dress. She didn't let the servants clear away the wedding cake. The room where the wedding lunch or dinner was to be was nothing was ever changed. It just got full of dust. She got old, and really old, but was still wearing her wedding dress, and it was just a really interesting way to portray a person and how they react to something like that happening in their life, that they just froze in time and refused to move on. And then there's a lot of other really good characters in the book. That there's the Great Expectations refers to this young lad, Pip, who finds out someone has left him some money, an inheritance, and he's just living with his aunt and uncle. His parents had died. His uncle's what do you call it when you work with metal? And anyway, he works hard. He does hard labor anyway, and they just barely get by. But anyway, he finds out many years later who really the money was from. He always thought it was from Miss Havisham, but he finds out later it was from something that had happened early in his life, and a person who he thought was really scary and mean. Anyway, just a lot of twists and turns. Good book. Probably one of my favorite of Dickens. Okay. But that opened up the world of classics, and I've tried to read all the Dickens. I haven't read all of them yet, but just knowing that, I can read classics and enjoy them.
So what were some of the others, like authors?
Well, I read Anna Karenina, and what was that one? I'll think of the title, but the story is about a woman who let's skip that story for now. I'll have to think more about it.
Okay, next book.
All right, well, the very first book I remember reading that was a chapter book that I picked out on my own was Little Witch, and I think I was about 10 or so years old when I read it. And I just loved it because she was just this little girl who, her mother was a mean, evil witch, and all she wanted was to have friends and go to school and be normal. And eventually she meets some people, especially one of the most memorable characters in the book is the grandmother of her friend. She makes a friend, and then the grandmother kind of takes her under her wing and lets her know that life doesn't have to be like it is right now, that there's a way out. And
her grandmother?
No, the friend's grandmother.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, one of the books I read that was just about the environment, and it's very specific to here in Utah, was called Canaries on the Edge. Have you heard of that?
I feel like I have.
You want me to check these off? Well, it's written by a local guy, and it's all about the use of the West Desert west of Salt Lake City, and how the Army uses it for testing,
right,
and
the
dropping
nuclear
bombs.
Testing was out there.
And there's storage of nuclear waste out there, and there's just all kinds of things. And MagCorp, is that the big operation on the edge of the lake that extracts minerals and puts out a lot of pollution in the air? It's just a really good wake-up story about pollution and taking care of our environment, and I really enjoyed that one. That was called Canaries on the Edge. It refers to when miners would go into a mine, they'd take a canary in a cage, and their breathing system is so delicate. If the canary dies, it means there's bad air.
So is it about like if the desert is getting destroyed. That's one of our more
The
fragile.
Canaries on the Edge refers to the people who live around there.
Oh.
Not Tooele so much as even further west. What's after Tooele out there? That there's been documented so many cancers and illnesses in that community.
Likely from the nuclear testing.
From everything that's out there. Well, another story that I really liked, and I think this was another one I just found browsing in the library, was called The Devil in the White City. And this is also more of a documentary. It's written as a story, but it's about the 1893 World's Fair that was in Chicago, and they called it the Columbian Fair because it was supposed to happen in 1892, which would have been 400 years from when Columbus discovered America.
Okay.
But it took them a little longer to get everything ready, and it happened in 1893.
In Chicago, you said?
In Chicago. And so what happened is they had it right on the shore of the Great Lake that Chicago has next to it. And they built all these big, beautiful buildings for fair goers to come into and see stuff. And one of the things that had happened just before this fair was in Paris. They had built the Eiffel Tower at the World's Fair that had been in Paris recently. And so the guy in charge of the whole setting up this city on the shore was looking for someone to out Eiffel the Eiffel Tower. They wanted something better than what the French had done. Mm-hmm. And he had all these designers and architects, but they were coming up with ideas, and he said finally he turned to the engineers, and this engineer designed. His last name was Ferris. He designed the Ferris wheel. Wow. And it was a big success eventually. Although when they first tried it out, everybody was afraid to get on it. And so Ferris's wife got on and said, "I'm not afraid to try it."
She trusted his engineering.
And there were people that were so scared. There was a man that I remember this part of the story. He was in the same seat with her, and he was so scared. He was down on his knees crying in her lap because he thought he was going to die. And anyway, but the devil in the White City, that was called the White City. The devil was, in the meantime, there's this man who's a sicko psycho murderer, and he knows that there's going to be all these visitors coming into Chicago to see the World's Fair, and he's luring women away and murdering them.
Oh my gosh.
And
do they eventually catch him?
Eventually they find out about him and catch him, yeah. Mm. But there were like several women who were killed by him during this World's Fair.
We loved the giant Ferris wheel in California Adventure last month.
Yeah.
It's pretty from up there, but it's all caged in.
You feel very safe.
You feel safe, but it's also not.
But you're still up high and then dropping down low. And
you have a great view. It's one of the few places where you can see outside the parks.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun.
I don't think I've ever ridden the Ferris wheel at Disneyland.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's check off The Devil in the White City. And then just recently, I guess I always thought I liked novels because they're entertaining, but I like really well done documentaries too, because that's what this next one is. It's called Dead Wake. Yeah. And it's about the, what's it called? Something Satania. The boat that was a passenger boat.
Oh, I know. It sounds
Lusitania.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
And it's just a passenger boat that a German U-boat sunk, and just off of the coast of Ireland, and yet the English government wouldn't send rescuers out to get the people out of the water because that would make the rescue boats vulnerable to more torpedoes. Yeah, but dead wake refers to, did you read it?
No.
As you see a torpedo coming through the water, you can see the wake it makes behind it. And so the wake is a little bit behind the actual danger, which is the torpedo. And the people on the boat could see that.
I could see it coming.
They could see it coming. And they tried to steer, the captain of the boat tried to steer it so that it didn't hit right on, but it ended up sinking the boat.
Were there any survivors?
Yeah, about half the people survived. But there could have been a lot more survivors. What ended up happening is just local fishermen along the coast of Ireland went out and
rescued people.
And some of them even rowed with oars out, miles out to sea to rescue them.
Wow.
But it gave individual stories. There was just not everybody. You couldn't give everybody's individual stories. So just a couple of people, it told them about their lives. So those are a couple of books I've read in the last few years. Of course, I love Lord of the Rings.
When did you first read it?
Jim loaned me his copy, which was actually Rosemary's copy.
While you were
when
dating?
we were dating, yeah. And when she never got those books back.
Are those the ones we still have?
I don't know. Those got kind of worn out, but I have a couple of copies of it. The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Just the wonderful fantasy of it all, and the character development, and heroes, and evil people, and just everything a good story has.
How many times do you think you've reread them?
I tried to read them every 5 years.
And I know you read them all to the boys when they were little.
I think I've probably read them 10 or 15 times.
Oh my goodness.
I just reread Harry Potter. That's another one of my favorite ones. I think that's only the second time I've read Harry Potter.
You just finished rereading the whole series?
I just finished reading it, yeah.
Was it as good as you remembered?
Yeah, sure. And I have so much of the movies now in my mind, the characters in the movies and some of the events, that I'll read stuff and I'll think, now why did they leave that out of the movie? Or that explains, something. It's kind of hard when you read a book and then watch the movie. Oh, that reminds me. One of my other really favorite is Atticus Finch and
To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird, right. And what made me think of that is that's the one book that the movie followed so closely. It was it
and
just
it's a really well done movie.
Well done and well done book.
Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and that are all pretty good movies, but better books.
Yeah.
Jack's in the middle of the third Harry Potter, and Lydia let him know that's one of the best and her favorite.
You've got to have, I don't know if she's up to it, you've got to have Holly read Little Witch or else read it to her. I think she'll...
I keep trying to get her and recommend, because she has the skill to read just about anything, but she's like me, she wants what she wants. So she's reading the Dork Diaries, but I was thinking maybe I'll read that to her.
Yeah.
The Little Witch.
I think it would be a good one to pass on to Anna, and she can read it to her siblings when they're on those long drives they go on when they're camping and stuff. Okay, so when you were young, you read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and I thought, well, I never read that. I should have read that when I was a young teenager, and so I read it then, and I really enjoyed that book.
I thought you gave it to me because you had read it and liked it.
And maybe that was it. Maybe I thought you should read it, but I thought, well, I should read it first. It was popular when I was younger. I like books that are specific to a certain time period, like this was around the Depression, the Great Depression. I don't usually like books that jump forward in time, backward in time, or sometimes I don't like it when it jumps characters, first person character for a
Like
few
who's telling the
chapters.
story.
Yeah, although the book I'm reading right now is like that, and I am enjoying that. The Beautiful Baby, is that what that?
Oh, Beautiful People, maybe?
No, it's called Anyway, whatever that book
Whatever
is.
one we're both reading right
Yeah.
now.
So that was To Kill a Mockingbird and A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I think one of my favorite characters in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is the mom. The dad ends up not dealing with the loss of job and trying to support his family, and the mom ends up doing housework for other people and still bearing children, and she just is such a strong character in the story.
And it's Francine is the main character, right?
Right. You must have remembered it. So did I talk about The Murder and the Poet?
Yeah.
Okay, so another book I really liked that I had my book club read was called Change Me into Zeus's Daughter. And that's about a young woman who's born maybe not during the Depression, but definitely in a very poor circumstances in rural USA, and
I feel like in the South.
yeah, and she has, I think it starts out she's taking a class, and she writes this story about when she and her children were starving, and the husband had left and would send $1 in the mail once in a while, or a couple of dollars, and she had some I think it was bean seeds that she was that were for replanting. They were seeds for planting, for growing beans, but they were so hungry they wanted to eat them, and so first she had to try and see if it killed her. Then it didn't. It would she'd let her children have them, and so she washed them really good and then ate them. And she wrote that story in this class she was taking in college, and the professor told her, tell more. You need to tell more of your story. And so she ends up writing this whole book. And
It's about her childhood too.
It starts out when she's little. She's got such bad buck teeth. Mm-hmm. Her front teeth are so far away from her back teeth that it says she could put her baby sister's fist right inside of her.
Between her teeth.
Her top. And she had moles on her face. All these very distracting moles, which I think that was more than just a dark circle. They were like raised up big moles. Mm-hmm. And she started earning money at babysitting or something when she was younger. And she had a teacher who had a mole and came to school one day, and the mole was gone. She asked her what happened. She says, I had it removed. And so she asked her about that and found out who the doctor was that had removed it. And so she saved up her money and went to him and wanted to have one mole removed. She could only afford one at a time. And the doctor's wife was also his receptionist, and he went out and talked to the receptionist, or she pulled him out. His wife pulled him out in the hallway, and they talked, and they came back in and said, well, it turns out we're having a special. And we're removing like 6 moles today for the price of 1 or something like that. And they removed all these awful moles off of her face because she was paying for it for herself. Anyway, the book has a picture of her. She's beautiful in her own way. But this is as she's an adult.
But she felt so ugly as a child.
She did. And it was just kind of how hard it was growing up poor, and still being able to find
like dignity.
Yeah, find yourself and find that you're good enough, you know. It reminds me of another book we were reading at the same time about China during the great upheaval in China when everybody was starving. I think it's called something Mountain, but I found a lot of comparisons and similarities between that story and this story of hers growing up poor in the United States.
It reminded me a lot of Hillbilly Elegy, like the Appalachian poverty.
Yes. I enjoyed that book too. Then of course there's the Brothers K. I've read that one twice. I think any book that I've read more than once must mean I liked it. And I think I read that 2 or 3 times. And that's just kind of a growing up in America during my lifetime. The Vietnam War was a big part of that story, and that was during my lifetime. And I think I just really liked the family and how much they looked out for each other and took care of each other. And I really liked the dad, his baseball stories, and how he always wanted to be a professional baseball player and ended up just being a coach for a AAA team or something like that.
And a mill worker.
Yeah, I'm working in the mill. Then a couple of other books that I've read that are one that's just because I have this real thing about Emily Dickinson. I've read The Life of Emily Dickinson, and I really liked that.
Is that a biography?
Yeah.
Do you remember who the author is?
It's a biography.
Do you remember who wrote it?
Yeah, Sewall. Sewall is his last name.
That was a good biography of Emily.
Right. And I was really fortunate when I went out to visit with David and Tina when they lived in Massachusetts. I went out there because Tina had a hysterectomy, and I went to just kind of take care of Lydia while she was recuperating. But when she was feeling well enough, we went for a drive and drove over to Amherst, which is where Emily Dickinson lived.
Do they have a museum?
Her house is a museum.
Oh.
And her brother's house next door is part of it, the Dickinson, I guess you'd call it a museum, but they've kind of kept the house, restored it to be just like it was when she lived in it. And next door, the brother's house where her sister-in-law lived, who she had a really close relationship with, that house had not been restored, but was almost exactly like it was when they'd lived in it 100 years before. And it was quite interesting too. But anyway, that's...
And Emily Dickinson, she never got married. She lived with her family her whole life, right?
Yeah. She and her sister eventually were the two that lived in the house by themselves, and she had lovers. There were love letters. There's been, that's part of the story, is who was the real love of her life, and there's actually 3 or 4 different people it could have been, and maybe all of them. Anyway, then the last one I really liked is one I read when I was in my early 20s, I think, and it was a friend of mine that recommended it. It was called Toto-chan, the Girl in the Window. Have you read it yet?
I read it a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Anyway, it's just about this little girl in Japan, and she's kind of precocious and can't sit still in her classroom and gets expelled from first grade or something like that. And her mom finds this really special school with this really special school teacher or principal who understands children and education and the right way to educate children. And anyway,
I for some reason thought Rosemary gave that to you when she was on her mission in Japan or something like that. That's like some weird memory about that book I have, but maybe not. Maybe you recommended it to her because she had been to Japan.
I think it was my friend Jenny who sends the Christmas letter every year that we like to make fun of. Mm-hmm. Jenny Robinson, I think that's who recommended the book to me or loaned it to me or something.
And have you been in other book clubs besides the one that's started from primary?
Not really. The ward here, or the neighborhood, they like to call it the neighborhood, so if there's non-members, they'll feel welcome in this book club. I think I have considered joining it, but all of the books they were reading were young adult or Mormon love stories, or just not very meaty stuff, not stuff I enjoyed reading, so...
And your book club with Stephanie is still once a month?
Yeah, and we actually still read books. It's more of a dinner club. That's a big part of the evening, but we do manage to talk about the books usually. It might be interesting to tell you what kind of books I don't like.
Sure.
I don't like dystopia, futuristic, this is how the Earth's, what's going to happen when the Third World War happens or when robots take over. I just don't like any of that. Although there's a few movies that I've seen that are good. Like I really like Star Wars and Star Trek, which is so far removed from dystopia that I don't think it's even in the same category. But for example, I could not read those ones that Jim really liked. About the girl has to go fight in the woods, and it's all on film, and the teenagers kill each other off.
Dad read those?
He has all 3 of those movies.
Oh, did he read the books?
I don't know if he read the books, but our book club chose those once, and I refused to read them.
Yeah, they're also young adult, which you also don't like.
And the same with the vampire ones that are young adult.
Yeah.
Moon. What are they? What are those called? She's a local lady that wrote the books. Anyway, have you heard of Margaret Atwood?
Yeah.
I can't read anything she writes.
I think she's such a good writer, but yeah, some of the dystopian future stuff. But you do like lots of mysteries.
Oh, I do like mysteries. As far as a series goes,
like Inspector Gamache.
Yeah, I like the first one I read almost. I did read all of her books. Was not Niall Marsh. She's also
Martha Grimes.
Martha Grimes. I've read all of her books, and I really like the Number One Ladies Detective Agency. That is light reading that's just good for your soul. It always,
also just well written too.
And it makes you really feel like Botswana is a place you would want to visit. And
did you ever watch the HBO series of that? That's good too.
Sometimes TV and movies can make the books come alive and you enjoy them more or as much. Yeah. They're like, oh wow, they really blew it. They didn't get the characters right, or they miscast.
Yeah.
Now that's the only book club I've been in. My friend Mary's in a book club, Mary Silver, that they are so rigid. They don't have refreshments or food. Whoever picked the book for that month has to give a book report. And they have discussion questions and.
I remember.
Oh well, we were in a book club.
Yeah, we had our family
book
one
club
going on for a bit, and I remember. I think it was probably about 10 years. Okay, 2 things. I remember we listened together to the first Inspector Gamache book when we took my kids camping down in central eastern Utah in the
to
desert
the sand dunes
in March, and Holly was probably about 1.5, so that would have been like 2016. And so then we both kept going in that series. But then I remember not long after that, I read a book called The End of Your Life Book Club about this man who just had a pretty informal book club with his mom during the last 2 years of her life. And then I thought, well, we should just be a little more intentional about sharing what we're reading and
Right.
sometimes reading the same stuff.
I think that was a good idea for us to put our Kindles on the same account.
Yeah.
So that what you're downloading, I can see, and what I've put in, you can see.
And I think maybe that one, what's the one that's based on Hamlet, but it's with the 4 dogs? Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah, it's the name. Oh, yeah.
We're not so good at all these names.
Yeah.
Steven's read that one.
Oh, that's a really good one.
But that's one that you'd downloaded that I just like needed something to read, and since you'd bought it, it's on the Kindle.
It's called The Life of Somebody.
Yeah.
I'll think of it. And a good friend of mine that was a quilter friend, she's the one that recommended that to me. Edward, what was it? It's a long one. Yeah, and he raises these special breed of dogs that are the perfect dogs, and his uncle marries his mother.
That's the Hamlet thing. The one we're reading right now is called Hello, Beautiful.
Hello, Beautiful. Yeah,
That just
one's
barely
good.
came out, and that one's checked out. We recently read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow because you bought it, and it was so good.
That was the book club selection, and
Oh, that was for your book club. I think it's one of the best books I've read this year. I mean, like
very,
in the past
very
year.
modern. It's about very modern things like writing games.
But then I like
gaming.
it also when we find a mystery like that. What's the old people one? The Thursday Murder
Oh,
Club.
the Thursday Murder Club. That's good too. I do like mysteries. They have to follow certain rules, so they can't just reveal who the murderer was or solve the mystery at the end without having given you the proper clues throughout the book.
Where it makes sense. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, now I get it.
I'm actually trying to read Hamlet. I like reading Shakespeare, although I don't understand it. I just like the sound of it. I like how poetic and like a melody it is to read Shakespeare. But
I haven't even tried since high school, but maybe if it's annotated where it's like
yeah,
telling you what everything means.
That's what I like to find is something on the internet that helps explain what's happening. I found something like that for Hamlet.
And you have a copy of it?
Of the book Hamlet, yeah, but I can't remember what the site was.
Hamlet was my favorite book of Shakespeare play that I read throughout high school, but that's probably because it was taught well by my 12th grade English teacher.
Who was?
Miss Horsley.
Right. English teachers are so important. Good English teachers.
There's this crazy thing in the Davis district right now where they're saying that we don't read novels as like a class or read alouds or anything.
You're not allowed to, you mean?
You're not supposed to. It's not.
Oh, you're kidding.
It's not a good use of instructional time.
Oh my gosh.
So Jack brings home Wonder as his homework that he was supposed to do at Disneyland, and there's this whole packet on it, and he read the whole book, and then when he finished
He read
it,
Wonder?
well, with his class. His teacher did a lot of it, and they just partner read and
Right.
as a class. So against district protocols. But then he checked it out of the library and handed it to me. I said, oh, I just think you'll like this book.
He
And-
suggested it to you. Did you tell him you'd already read it?
Yeah, but I told him I'd read it again, and I pretended to. And so but I did read some of it, and there's a scene in there where the mom walks out with their dog, and the Augie and the sister say goodbye to their longtime dog, who's named Daisy, and she gets put down that night. And I went and just asked Jack, when your teacher read that part, what were you crying? And he said yes. I said, was anyone else? No, just me, because I know his tender heart, and he
Yeah.
gets into stories.
Wow, and the dog being named Daisy too.
Well, I know.
I always enjoy a good animal story too,
Yeah,
like Old Yeller or
Red Fern.
yeah. That was my mom's favorite book, Where the Red Fern Grows.
I didn't know that.
Just before my mom died, when she was living here with me, every night after she got into bed, I read to her a chapter from the Book of Mormon because she was trying to finish it. And incidentally, at the front of her Book of Mormon, she had on this page that had a lot of blank space, she had written the dates that she'd finished the Book of Mormon. And there was about 10 dates written there. But then after we'd read in our Book of Mormon, then we were reading Scarlett O'Hara. What's
Civil War?
What's the Scarlett O'Hara book? Oh my gosh, I'm so bad at remembering things. The
Gone with the Wind.
I knew it had wind in it. Gone with the Wind. We were reading that together, and it's funny because I was gone for 3 weeks to Cambodia and Vietnam with our friends and with Jim. So she stayed out at Kim's place, and I made sure that she took the book with her, Gone with the Wind, so he could read to her every night, or Mary could. Well, he couldn't follow or read Gone with the Wind. It was too, I don't know. So he read Charlotte's Web to her instead.
I'm sure she enjoyed that too.
I think that was another one of my favorite. Oh, just so you know, one of the reasons I really loved reading was in 4th grade, I had a teacher who for some reason liked me. I mean, I guess all my teachers liked me, but she noticed me, and I was like her teacher's pet. And here I was, this gangly girl that wore glasses and came from, the McGarrys, who were hundreds of McGarrys in Shelley. And yet she had kind of selected me as her favorite kid in the class. But anyway, I liked her for that, but also every day after lunch recess, we came in, sat down in our desks, and she read to us for like half an hour. And one of the books she read was Island of the Blue Dolphins. She read Charlotte's Web. She just read to us, and I just loved sitting there and listening to her voice and thinking, oh, this is such a good book. And that's kind of what got me reading.
I remember listening to my teacher, maybe 3rd grade, read aloud to us every day right after lunch. And it was a part of the day I'd always look forward to.
Oh, yeah.
And when I taught, I was always had a book that we were reading out. I read Harry Potter to my class. I read Where the Red Fern Grows, Holes, and I think it's part of why I like my position now, is because when the district folks come out with their big important mandates, the principals are like kind of the last line of, no, we can actually let the teachers do what we've known for 60 years is good for kids.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any other bookish questions. No, I don't think so. We'll do another interview soon. Okay, goodbye, family. And say goodbye.
Goodbye.